80 plus sweet pet plus smash plus entrepreneurship plus cute baby, Jiang Wan traveled back to the 1980s and was thrown out of bed by her rough husband when she opened her eyes. She was determined to divorce her. They all traveled through the golden finger heavenly way, but she became a lazy and vulgar illiterate, a haunting sight that everyone avoided. Jiang Wan felt a headache as she looked at the pitch-black house and the empty walls. She was afraid that she would have to eat mud and drink milk these days. Don't panic. It seems that her bad hand is still playing like a king. Xiao Bailian comes to kill a pair of people. The best relatives let them die every second. They become rich and strive to start their own businesses. By the way, they lead the fashion trend and lead a prosperous life. Junmei Little Fresh Meat, a successful entrepreneur, was chased by a man who lined up outside the family courtyard. Jiang Wanmei happily went to divorce her husband, preparing to start a new life. The rough man's husband hugged her in his arms and kissed her passionately. "Wife, don't leave. My money belongs to you, and I am also yours." Chapter 1. 3 years of marriage, still together, one action as fierce as a tiger. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. It's so hot. On the big bed inside the room, Jiang Wan held the man tightly in a drunken and dazed state, and couldn't help but let out a low moan from the corner of her lips. The air was filled with a scorching breath, and the man's heavy breathing came from his ear. It seemed as if a fire was burning inside his body. She pulled open the clothes at the collar and looked at the man under her in a daze. With short hair and handsome features, her robust body was exposed to the air, and the wheat-colored 8-pack abs under her lifted collar were burning her eyes. The man under her is considered top-notch, with every abdominal muscle growing on her aesthetic. Too much desire. Where are these top male models from? Hee. Jiang Wan chuckled and couldn't help but hook her arm around his neck. Her face turned slightly red and her whole body was hot, unconsciously pressing against him. As if she was completely immersed in it, she felt ashamed, yet so beautiful. Jiang Wan's heart was racing and her body was burning. She pursed her dry lips and kissed her Adam's apple, then unbuttoned his collar with both hands. Just as she closed her eyes and kissed, the man's gaze below her became sharp. His powerful hand grabbed Jiang Wan's shoulder, and a deep and angry rebuke came from him. "You, what are you doing?" She was pushed away hard and fell heavily to the ground. Junlang frowned with a look of shame, her chest heaving and panting, and quickly fastened the green military uniform that she had torn open. A pair of cold stars glared at her, full of contempt. "Jiang Wan, I can't imagine you doing such a thing while I'm asleep to avoid getting divorced." The angry scolding stimulated her brain, and Jiang Wan, who was feeling drowsy, opened her eyes in pain. A low and small house, with dark and old-fashioned brick and tile houses, catches the eye. The glass of the room was pasted with faded words of happiness, and the light bulb hanging with a spider web flickered and made a sizzling sound. She was surprised. What is this place? Jiang Wanben is a top fashion designer who has just won a domestic award and is celebrating with a handsome male model at a bar. After drinking a few more glasses, I thought it was a drunken affair, but who knew I was here with my eyes wide open. The slanted calendar on the dark wall vividly imprints the year 1988, and memories burst into her mind like a swarm of movies. She traveled through time and even arrived in the 1980s. The original owner had the same name as her, also known as Jiang Wan, and was an illiterate person who had never attended school. Not only is it vulgar and shameless, but it is also a haunting concern that the entire family courtyard cannot avoid. 3 years ago, she married the man in front of her, Gao Tianqua, and was later taken to the military district's family courtyard. On the day of his wedding, he went to the military and hasn't even touched her finger to this day. So, she has been married for 3 years and still has a good relationship. Looking at the cracked mirror on the wall at night, my face was covered in 3 feet of powder. His pale face was adorned with 2 red cheeks, and his mouth was full of lipstick, like a female ghost. The floral shirt on my body was half covered and half exposed, both shameful and eye-catching. Not to mention the vastness of the sky, Jiang Wan startled herself. She sat on the ground, pulling over the blanket to cover her exposed body. Jiang Wan awkwardly swept his back towards his tall and sturdy figure, at least 185 meters tall, with his long legs accentuating his tall and sturdy physique. Her flat-cut hairstyle exudes a military toughness, and when I look at her, it is full of a sense of oppression. Gao Tianque is the platoon leader of the military region, and his handsome appearance makes him a top-notch sharpshooter. He is always a model in the military. Only because he had an accident when he went out on a mission that year, Jiang Wan's parents gave him 2 mantu when he was dying of hunger. As a result, the original owner took a liking to his handsome appearance and insisted on marrying him. In order to repay his kindness, Gao Tianque reluctantly married Jiang Wan. I thought she was just stubborn, but who would have thought that Jiang Wan was a rude and illiterate person? She falsely claimed to have cut her wrist and committed suicide in order to get him home, only to find out that Gao Tianque, who had been deceived, was angry and proposed a divorce. The original owner was crying and making no use of it, so he gave a fierce operation like a tiger. While he was asleep, he dressed up carefully and rushed forward to ask for raw rice to be cooked. Gao Tianque is a responsible man, and if the 2 of them fall asleep, they naturally won't mention divorce again. Jiang Wan's brain pricked with pain and she had an urge to die. What kind of damn persona is this? She wished she could find a hole to burrow into when it comes to being a strong man. Gao Tianque clenched his fists and made up his mind to divorce this woman for everything. Watching Jiang Wan cover her waist and turn around with a cold face, she said, "I'm sorry just now, are you okay?" He is a tough guy in the military camp. He was too angry just now, that's why he pushed her out of bed. At this moment, I was worried that my strength was too strong and I might have injured her. It's really frustrating for such an excellent man to marry his original owner. He just didn't know that someone had changed in his body now. Jiang Wan habitually replied, "It's okay, it was my fault just now." Gao Tianque's gaze was puzzled, and she suddenly changed her temper and apologized voluntarily. Even so, he was determined. "I have handed in the divorce report and will send you back to your hometown after the divorce application is approved." He looked at Jiang Wan calmly and anticipated how she would answer next. Gao Tianque was determined to divorce the original owner, so he simply followed his wishes. "I agree to divorce," Jiang Wan replied calmly. Gao Tianque's surprised gaze was taken aback, and she actually agreed. She used to throw tantrums and run into walls before mentioning divorce. "Either you want to hang yourself or smash the things inside the house to pieces." Jumping and pointing at his nose, he cursed him for being heartless and heartless. Jiang Wan suddenly changed her tone and said, "But I have the conditions. The sky is wide and the gaze is deep, and it is indeed not so easy." No wonder he is so calm, he must have wanted to continue to entangle, so he pretended to agree. "I need to temporarily stay here before divorce. Jiang Wan has just arrived here, and although she is unwilling to admit it, she doesn't know how to survive in this era where rice, flour, and oil all require tickets. Even if we have to move, it still takes time." Gao Tianque's divorce application has been submitted and can be approved within a week at most. Anyway, he usually lives in the military camp, so it's okay for her to stay in the family courtyard for a period of time. "Don't forget what you promised me, don't turn back then. It's just divorce." Jiang Wanmei doesn't care at all. "Brother Tianque." A woman's voice came from outside the door. "Someone is here." Gao Tianque's cheeks turned slightly red and he turned his face to one side. His gaze shifted away from her and he said, "Hurry up and put on your clothes." The 2 people in broad daylight looked disheveled, and Jiang Wan was picking up clothes that had fallen on the ground and putting them on. The room door was pushed open, and a woman pushed open the path and walked straight in. Jiang Wan looked at the woman, who was only 20 years old. The pink plaid dress accentuated her slender figure, with long hair tied to her waist and a bow hairpin. The red high heels exude charm, with a gentle and elegant temperament. Standing in front of her is like a proud white swan. The woman's face suddenly changed when she saw the scene before her. "Brother Tianque, what are you doing?" Suddenly breaking into her house without saying hello, I still have to ask about such an obvious scene. I didn't see that her clothes were not put on yet. The woman's cold eyes swept over Jiang Wan with disdain and walked straight towards Gao Tianque, revealing a charming smile. "Brother Tianque." Gao Tianque awkwardly buttoned his shirt and said, "Xiaona, why did you come?" "Lu Xiaona." A search in Jiang Wan's mind revealed that she was Lu Xiaona from the military region family courtyard. The woman who almost got engaged before Gao Tianque married the original owner. If it weren't for the original owner's pursuit of life and death, the person who married Gao Tianque at this time should be her. Chapter 2. Public Enemies Wearing Military Courtyards. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Jiang Wan has lived in such a miserable state for so many years, and at this moment, the sound of forceful knocking on the door came from outside the yard. "Pop pop 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 pop, Jiang Wanmei, come out and don't hide inside as a shrinking turtle. Dare to act or not, don't think I don't know you're at home just because you're like this. You are such a cruel and ruthless woman, you are really blind to such a good person as Captain Gao." Jiang Wan listened to the constant insults outside, as if the commotion was aimed at her. Lu Xiaona turned around and opened the courtyard door, trying to stop her. "Mrs. Li, what's up with you?" There was a middle-aged woman standing outside the door with an unpleasant expression. "Xiaona, don't stop me. I must settle accounts with that illiterate person today." Li's sister.in-law angrily slipped a pair of pants and happened to come out of the house with a wide sky. "I know he's back." In the middle of the night, the two of them had such a fierce argument, and there was a commotion in the area. The whole family courtyard heard them. Li's sister.in-law is a Sun Company commander from the same military region, and his relationship with Gao Tianque is not very good on weekdays. A while ago, two companies engaged in a military competition, but the second company lost to their first company. Behind the scenes, everyone praises Gao Tianque as the king of soldiers in the army, and his position as deputy battalion commander is determined to be his. Mrs. Li has a hot temper on weekdays, and she can easily catch fire like a cannon barrel. The sound was so loud that it caught up with the mobile loudspeaker, wishing the entire family courtyard could hear it. Gao Tianque quickly asked, "Sister Li, what's up?" She was furious and seemed to have taken gunpowder, wishing she could poke her pants into his face more often. "What's up? Look at your illiterate family. No, your wife did a good job. The day before yesterday, she ran to my house to steal a chicken and was caught by me. I didn't give it to her, but she blocked the door and cursed so harshly. Last night, I climbed over a wall and ran to my house, cutting the pants that I had washed for my daughter like this." Li's sister.in-law's red bodybuilding pants were cut to pieces, and there were also two large holes on her buttocks. Jiang Wan stared at those two big holes and remembered that there was indeed something going on. "Mrs. Li, don't worry, I'll compensate you for her." Lu Xiaona said and took out two 10 yuan bills. "Can you see if the money is enough?" Li's sister.in-law insisted this time, "I had a lot of trouble getting these pants from someone. My young master is going to attend a school performance the day after tomorrow. What should I do if I run out of these pants?" Zhang Xiaona pulled at Gao Tianque's sleeve with self-blame and said, "I'm sorry, brother Tianque, it's all my fault for not stopping my sister.in-law." The sister.in-law who were watching the excitement in the courtyard also gathered around when they heard the commotion. The more she helped Jiang Wan, the more her sister.in-law attacked Jiang Wan's group. A group of women were full of gossip and said, "Xiaona, please don't protect her. Captain Gao is not at home on weekdays. How many times have you helped her before and after this? Just say last month, because my grand-sister.in-law didn't give her eggs, she put chicken droppings into someone else's bed. Last week, she looked at the flowers planted by her sister.in-law's family again and pulled out the precious orchids she had grown for them. 3 days ago, Lin's sister.in-law offended her with a sentence. She put thumbtacks inside her family's shoes, and her feet were pricked for several days, making it impossible to walk. The original owner's charges were simply too numerous to be recorded. Gao Tianque frowned and looked at Jiang Wan beside him with a gloomy face. Jiang Wan looked embarrassed. Don't ask, it was her who did the asking. Lu Xiaona secretly chuckled and then stepped forward to defend Jiang Wan. I should have helped my sister.in-law even more when brother Tianque is not here. Please don't be angry, sister.in-law Li. I apologize for her. That's interesting. If you want to apologize, it's also her apology, Jiang Wan. How could this woman apologize on her behalf? This posture actually makes her more like a wealthy wife. Lu Xiaona is the daughter of a military district instructor, who just got into college last year. On weekdays, no one looks down on them for being arrogant, except for having a good relationship with the original owner. She looks beautiful and dresses well. The original owner envies her every day, and the makeup of the ghost-drawn talisman was learned from her. She also secretly suggested to the original owner to pretend to commit suicide and deceive him into coming back. If Gao Tianque divorces, she will directly throw herself at raw rice and cook mature rice. As a result, the rice was not cooked, which made Gao Tianque even more disgusted with her. Jiang Wan looked coldly at her with her fingers hooked on her wide sleeves, and she keenly smelled the smell of green tea. No wonder they arrived at her house early in the morning, knowing that someone was coming to trouble the original owner. Instructor Lu is a high-ranking senior with a sense of gratitude, so his relationship is naturally very good. Originally, both of them were getting engaged, but to everyone's surprise, Jiang Wan came out halfway and Lu Xiaona cried at home for a month because of this. The original owner was really foolish. He didn't realize that this woman had ulterior motives. It was clear that he was coveting her man. Surprisingly, he foolishly listened to her various suggestions, which made Gao Tianque even more disgusted with her and kept mentioning divorce. Xiaona, it's none of your business, you don't need to blame yourself, Gao Tianque gently comforted her. Turning his head but glaring angrily at Jiang Wan, his attitude was completely different. It was all his unruly wife who caused the trouble, and Gao Tianque's always strong face was almost ruined. Jiang Wan sneered and walked between the two, pushing Lu Xiaona away from Gao Tianque. Mrs. Li was a little scared when she saw her coming over and said, "What do you want to do? Do you dare to hit me in front of your man?" Jiang Wan smiled and said, "Sister Li, can I have a look at these bodybuilding pants?" She took the cut and tattered pants, and the original owner was really particular. Look at how fast and ruthless this move is. This thin strip is like linen, even if it is patched, it cannot be patched. Although it is difficult to understand this aesthetic, these bodybuilding pants are popular in this era. The workmanship of these pants is quite average, and it's not difficult for Jiang Wan to make a similar one. Sorry, Sister Li, I will definitely compensate you later. Lu Xiaona leaned forward and said, "Sister-in-law, don't be impulsive. I heard that these bodybuilding pants have been very popular lately. Brother Tianque, if you really want to buy it, I can ask my aunt for help." Lu Xiaona's aunt works in a state-owned clothing factory and can buy any good materials and styles in advance. Jiang Wan lowered her head and smiled, looking at Lu Xiaona. "Xiaona, didn't you ask me to cut Mrs. Li's bodybuilding pants?" Lu Xiaona's face turned red and her smile froze in an instant. "Sister-in-law, what are you saying?" "Brother Tianque, I never said that, sister-in-law, you can't wrongly accuse me." Lu Xiaona's tearful little appearance on the pear blossom almost overflowed with tears of grievance. "It's really a white lotus on the Alps, it's a pity not to act." Li's sister-in-law became angry and said, Jiang Wan, don't wrongly accuse Xiao Na. Xiao Na is not such a person. Is that right? Jiang Wan looked at Lu Xiaona, who was crying. I remember you said that Mrs. Li and her wife are stingy. They usually split a penny into 2 halves and refuse to give me even a chicken. They are even willing to spend 11.5 yuan to buy their daughter's fitness pants and cut 2 holes in her pants to see how she still feels. Jiang Wan spoke out Lu Xiaona's true words, and her face turned from red to pitch black. Gao Tianqua's face darkened and he didn't believe it. Don't talk nonsense, he said. This woman, in order to shift responsibility, actually falsely accused Xiaona and fabricated lies to deceive others. I didn't say it, Lu Xiaona resisted to the death and denied, you can't falsely accuse me just to shirk responsibility. She knew that no one would believe Jiang Wan, a person whose reputation had been ruined, and everyone began to accuse her of bullying and framing. This little Bailian is indeed smart. She knows that Sister Li is a cannon barrel, and that Sun Lianchang and Gao Tianqua have a competitive relationship. After calculating the time accurately, I waited for Gao Tianqua to be at home and deliberately stopped Mrs. Li from coming to settle the accounts with Jiang Wan. The little white flower in front of the person, and the tricks behind the person are really impressive. Jiang Wan looked at her with a cold expression and said, I didn't say you knew it the most. Do you think I'm the only one who hears what you're saying? Lu Xiaona is in a panic, isn't she? I didn't see anyone else when I went to find Jiang Wancher that afternoon. Illiteracy dares to speak loudly in public, but it's hard not to be heard. Chapter 3. A pair of little white lotus to kill a pair. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Mrs. Li turned her head angrily and said, Xiaona, you promised me not to tell anyone. Only Xiaona knows about the fact that she spent 11.5 yuan on bodybuilding pants, not even her own man. Captain Sun is also a stingy old man. She spent so much money on buying pants for her daughter, and when she found out, she would definitely be scolded. She reminded Lu Xiaona not to tell anyone. No, I really didn't say it. The more Lu Xiaona explained, the more she felt guilty. Li's sister.in.law questioned on the spot, if it weren't for her telling her, how could Jiang Wan know the price of the pants? Lu Xiaona glared fiercely at Jiang Wan, her fingers firmly stuck in her palm, and this slut even bit her back. What's going on today when this idiot asks her to do whatever she usually does? She shed tears of grievance and could only grit her teeth to admit it. I did tell Sister Jiang about the pants, and I really didn't want her to cut Ingzi's pants. Mrs. Li's face turned green and she stomped her feet in anger, saying, Xiaona, I didn't expect you to be such a person. Jiang Wan was just deliberately deceiving her, but Lu Xiaona ended up being guilty and resorting to self-deception. She avenged herself on the same day she had her grudges, never the next day. Don't blame her for being impolite when playing with her like this. Gao Tianqua looked at Xiaona who was crying and said, Sister Li, don't be angry. Xiaona definitely didn't mean it. At this moment, I'm still speaking for Xiao Bailian, but who let her cut the pants? Jiang Wan suddenly spoke up, it's my fault. The crowd who had just been noisy suddenly fell silent. Jiang bowed and apologized to sister.in.law Li tonight, I'm sorry, sister.in.law Li. I used to be young and immature. I guarantee to compensate you with a pair of bodybuilding pants before Ingzi's performance the day after tomorrow. Did you hear me right? Guijian Chou unexpectedly apologized and said he wanted compensation. This is something unprecedented, and everyone was stunned when her attitude changed dramatically. Mrs. Li was originally going to get angry, but when she was publicly apologized, she felt a bit at a loss. That's what you said. I must see the pants the day after tomorrow. It's a deal. Jiang Wan smiled and agreed. So many people have heard that she will be exactly the same if she doesn't lose money. Gao Tianqua can't spare her. Several sister.in.law scattered, and Li's sister.in.law turned her head and glared angrily at Lu Xiaona. Lu Xiaona stood beside Gao Tianque with a pouting mouth and a face full of grievances, refusing to leave. Do you have anything else to do? Jiang Wan looked at her and said, do you still want to come home and have a cup of green tea? No need. Lu Xiaona awkwardly pressed her toes against the brick at the door, stepping on her round toe high heels and leaving. I slipped under my feet and almost stumbled in embarrassment. I intended to take this opportunity to make Gao Tianque dislike her even more and to have them divorce as soon as possible. Who knew that Jiang Wan, a big illiterate person, suddenly turned into a different person? She turned her head and glared at the two people entering the room. I want to see. What compensation are you getting? Returning to the room, Gao Tianque was very angry, and his cold eyes kept staring at Jiang Wan. He suppressed his anger in his heart, but still earnestly educated him. Having no education is not important. How could you steal Mrs. Li's chicken in the middle of the night? Do you know that stealing is a crime? She also cut Li's sister-in-law's daughter's pants like this, and was punished for both theft and damage to personal property. As family members of military personnel, we should not knowingly violate the law and will be sent to labor reform. He finished speaking and put the general's green handkerchief on the table, which contained 30 pounds of food vouchers and 128 yuan in cash. Gao Tianque is a military officer, with a monthly salary plus more than 100 allowances, leaving some for personal use. This is to give her all the salary. No need. Jiang Wan pushed away the money on the table. I can handle my own affairs. Previously, Gao Tianque gave the original owner 80 yuan per month for living expenses, as well as 20 kilograms of food and 5 kilograms of meat tickets. An ordinary family has enough to eat for a few people, but the original owner eats and drinks recklessly and spends less than half a month. If there is no food to eat in the second half of the month, I will steal and rob, and if I don't give it, I will block the door and curse. Now she doesn't want it anymore. It's really a bit confusing. Whatever you want. Gao Tianque's attitude was cold, he put down his money and turned to leave. There is only one room at home, and on weekdays, Gao Tianque comes back to sleep in the firewood room. Putting down the folding bed is where he sleeps. How much he dislikes living under the same roof. He rarely comes back, at most he just delivers food to the original owner. Jiang Wan looked at the pitch-black house and the disheveled clothes on her body, with a messy and destitute house on the ground. She took a deep breath and really wanted to close her eyes and sleep. The next day, Gao Tianque woke up very early and had a habit of getting up early to exercise in the military camp. Jiang Wan is drying clothes in the yard, wearing a white polyester shirt. My hair was slightly curled up behind my ears, and I simply combed my hair in a ponytail. She only found this piece of clothing that looked quite pleasing to the eye, and didn't notice anything else. The original owner had a well-proportioned figure, but in fact, he was not ugly. The terrifying makeup on the face has been washed clean, giving it a clear and beautiful appearance. The sunlight shone on her face, revealing a hint of tranquility. Gao Tianque's eyes were slightly stunned, thinking he had read wrong. The person in front of me was completely different from the usual heavy makeup, as if they were two people. Jiang Wan finished drying the sheets and walked into the room, watching him staring at her all the time. After all, every time the original owner sees her husband, she transforms into a monkey butt. Such a refreshing makeup look actually brightens people's eyes. Gao Tianque pushed open the room door, and the room that was smashed yesterday was cleaned up. Although there were not many pieces of furniture, it was at least tidy. The pitch-black vase and towel were also cleaned, and the once dirty and messy home was completely transformed. The sudden change left Gao Tianque momentarily stunned. Jiang Wan put down the laundry basin in her hand and said, "I've sewn your military uniform." The military uniform was neatly stacked on the headboard, and the buttons on the collar were sewn back on. Gao Tianque is most concerned about his military identity, and his military uniform is neatly folded every night. After the button was torn off last night, he originally wanted to go back to the military camp and sew it again, but he didn't expect Jiang Wan to sew it for him. He looked at the neatly sewn buttons and couldn't help but be surprised. You know, in the past, she was so lazy that she didn't even support the oil bottle when it fell. Jiang Wan is a fashion designer, and needlework is easy for her, which can be considered as some compensation for him. She will continue to live here, and the dirty and smelly home is unbearable. The bedsheets and pillows emit an unpleasant odor. Since we are staying here temporarily, whether luxurious or at least clean and tidy. The weather was too hot, and after being busy all night, she took a deep breath. Sweat beads dripped down my cheeks and condensed with my hair. Jiang Wan picked up an enamel cup and poured cold water into it. She licked the water stains on her lips and gently wiped her fair neck with her hand. The slightly open button vaguely revealed the collarbone, and Gao Tianque slid his Adam's apple, unconsciously swallowing saliva. Quickly shift your gaze away from her and see what happened to you just now. Gao Tianque is a bit dazed. How could I have such a strange feeling towards her? Chapter 4. Men can't say they can't do it. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Jiang Wan stared and realized that she had acted too elegantly. The original owner was a rude and unbearable woman, who slammed her water glass onto the table with a loud thud. Lo, I tilted my head and let out a loud water burp. Still as vulgar as before, Gao Tianque finally regained his doubts in his eyes. Jiang Wan cleaned up all night, tired and hungry, and went to the kitchen to rummage through it. The rice jars were all empty. Except for a few dry potatoes thrown in the corner, there's really nothing. She looked at the empty kitchen and couldn't help but sigh. Mice come to her house with tears in their eyes. Their time travel is just a matter of fate. Her daughter directly cheats, but she got divorced and didn't even have to eat. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have strongly refused the money and food tickets given by Gao Tianque. She touched her groaning stomach, feeling really sad without money. At this point, don't be picky. Let's fill our stomachs first. She looked at the stove with a bewildered expression as she held the potato. How should she operate this thing? There were still a few pieces of firewood left in the corner. She put the firewood inside and found a box of matches from the cabinet to light it. In an instant, strong white smoke emerged, and Jiang Wan covered her mouth with tears streaming down her face. Peepa, peepa, ding, dong. A loud noise erupted from the smoking kitchen, spreading all around. Gao Tianque returned from outside and the neighbor's child started shouting. It's on fire, Jiang Wenblein's house is on fire. Gao Tianque quickly rushed in, pushed open the door, and saw the entire kitchen filled with white smoke, like a fairyland. Jiang Wan rushed out from inside with a pitch-black face and fell directly into his arms. What's wrong with you? Gao Tianque looked down at her face, which was like a flower cat. He quickly pushed her away, and Jiang Wan's eyes were almost unable to open. 2 lines of spicy tears flowed down my face, and 2 white marks marked my dark cheeks. Cough cough. She covered her mouth and nose and rolled her eyes. I'm cooking. Cooking. Gao Tianque quickly pulled out the firewood from the stove, and it turned out to be wet firewood. She's not cooking here, she's clearly going to demolish the house. Why can't this wet firewood be used directly to make a fire? Jiang Wan didn't know about this. You should know that the original owner was so lazy that he cramped, could lie down and never stand, could eat ready-made food and never do it himself. So I never cook at home, and when I get hungry, I spend money to buy food in the cafeteria. Jiang Wan still underestimated the difficulties of life in this era. She couldn't even make a fire. Gao Tianque quickly opened the window of the firewood room to disperse the thick smoke, and the stove emitted black smoke. Opening the stove lid again, I saw that the 2 dry potatoes inside the pot were basically burnt into black charcoal. Looking at Jiang Wan's dark little face again, with a black breath emanating from her nose, I inexplicably felt a bit amused. You go wash your face, I'll go to the cafeteria to get you a meal. Gao Tianque left with his lunchbox. Jiang Wan used a wash basin to collect some water, but after touching for a while, she couldn't find any soap. I could only use the remaining soap residue to soak in some water, which barely washed my face clean. Her hair and eyebrows were burnt, so she found a scissor cat to trim the ends of her hair in front of the mirror. At this moment, Gao Tianque came back with a lunchbox, and when he saw her at the door, he immediately rushed over and grabbed the scissors from her hand. Angrily rebuked, "What are you doing? Didn't I go buy you food? Why are you committing suicide again?" Jiang Wan turned her face in shock and touched the ends of her hair, originally only wanting to trim the burnt parts. Who wants to commit suicide? Just now, when he snatched it, the bangs on his forehead were cut open like a dog's bite. Jiang Wan looked at herself in the mirror with a small black face, then turned her head and glared at him. "How are you responsible?" Gao Tianque swallowed his saliva and said, "It's just a few strands of hair. It will grow up in a few days." The atmosphere in the room is somewhat tense. Gao Tianque took a deep breath and couldn't help but become even more nervous. "I don't know if I can do it." Jiang Wan stared at him seriously and said, "Man, you can't say you can't do it." He picked up scissors and leaned over, frowning as he stared at the hair in front of her forehead. The two of them got very close, so close that one could feel his breathing. Her hair emitted a scattered scent of soap, and a soft light shone on her face. Although the eyes are not very big, they are very bright, and the fair skin is full of collagen. Jiang Wan pursed her lips slightly, swallowed Gao Tianque's Adam's apple, and instinctively retreated. With a few scissors, my hair was finally cut neatly. It's just much shorter than before, it looks like half a watermelon peel is stuck on the head. She quickly opened the lunchbox, which contained 2 steamed buns of rice and jade noodles, paired with some shredded pickled vegetables. Eating a full stomach is the right thing now, and at this time, the hair doesn't care so much anymore. Hungry Jiang Wan didn't care about her appearance and picked up a steamed bun to nibble on. She almost choked to death in one gulp and waved her hand towards Gao Tianque, saying, "Cough, cough, water, water." Gao Tianque looked at her as she rolled her eyes and twitched, not knowing what she meant. "What's wrong with you?" Jiang Wan turned her head and rushed to the faucet, taking a few strong sips before letting it go. Hoo. She gasped heavily and almost passed by. Looking at the steamed bun in her hand, Jiang Wan thought to herself that she would go to the town tomorrow to see if she could make some money. She is a contemporary professional woman, why do top domestic designers need men to support her? But what should we do now? She remembered that when the original owner got married, she brought her dowry and dug out several new pieces of material from under the wooden box. The original owner liked flashy clothes, and these few simple pieces of material were all pressed against the bottom of the box. She smiled and picked up scissors and needles, which made it easy to handle. The next morning, in the morning, Jiang Wan had just woken up when she heard footsteps coming from outside the door. Gao Tianque bought breakfast and came back, looking at her wearing a pair of black circles under her eyes as if she was very tired. Last night he slept in the woodshed and saw that the light bulb had not turned off all night. This woman has been tinkering all night, I don't know what she's doing. Of course, he didn't care about her either. Breakfast is left here, I'll leave first. Gao Tianque remained indifferent and put down his lunchbox, then turned around and walked towards the outside. Jiang Wan glanced at the parked bicycles in the courtyard and chased them out. Are you busy? Can you give me a ride later? The place she is going to is a bit far, and there is no shuttle bus yet. I was thinking that Gao Tianque could also take her to the military camp. I'm afraid it won't be possible today. He refused sharply. It's not going well. Okay then. Jiang Wan had no intention of relying on him. Jiang Wan opened the lunchbox on the table and found 2 meat buns inside. This meat bun is really delicious, much better than those 2 steamed buns from yesterday. You should know that meat is currently supplied in limited quantities, and some families cannot eat meat for several meals a month. If you want to eat more, you can only spend money to buy it. She has been craving a lot lately and just wants to eat something with meat and fishy taste. Jiang Wan carefully wrapped the buns in paper, stuffed them into a bulging canvas bag, and left the door. Today is the 15th market, and the town is very lively every month. Besides, she also plans to make some money and continue living her own life when she gets divorced. She had just walked to the yard when a few children saw her clapping her hands, singing and dancing. Great illiterate, playing hooligans. Men and women enter the thatched cottage without distinction, carrying pants and running around the street. Stealing chicken in the middle of the night and being bitten by dogs, 2 mantu for bridegroom. The original owner ran into the men's restroom because he didn't recognize the characters on the public restroom, and ran out of the thatched cottage in embarrassment, carrying his pants. The children in the family home made up a jingle, secretly mocking her 2 mantu for a cheap man. The child who was unaware of everything was circling around Jiang Wan, causing several sister.in.law to quickly take their own child home. Stop talking, be careful that illiterate person will come back and hit you. Jiang Wan sighed. The original owner's character was simply a haunting concern that the entire family could avoid. Xiao Jiang. At this moment, a woman's voice came from behind. A middle-aged woman riding a Phoenix bicycle chased after her from behind and was greeting her. Jiang Wan looked at the woman, who was slightly chubby and had a smiling appearance. She turned out to be the sister.in.law of the family courtyard. She stopped the car and looked at her carrying a large cloth bag. Yo! Are you going to the market? Yeah, sister.in.law. Jiang Wan remembers the sister. In.law of the family courtyard, who was also the director of the women's office. On weekdays, I occasionally come to care about Jiang Wan's life, mainly doing their marital work. Come on up, I happen to be there too, and I'll give you a ride. Last time, the original owner secretly pulled out the orchid from the sister.in.law's house, not only ignoring past grievances but also willing to take her. The entire family home, it is estimated that only she is willing to deal with the original owner. Thank you, sister.in.law. Jiang Wan happened to walk so hard that her legs became weak and she sat in the back seat of her car. Jiang Wan nibbled on the meat bun in her hand, and the sister.in.law smiled and said, Xiao Jiang, is this the meat bun from the military cafeteria? Although Captain Gao is usually a bit aloof, he is actually quite good to you. Look, I've brought back all these meat buns for you to eat. Jiang Wan didn't understand, it was just a meat bun and said, Sister-in-law, isn't this bun cafeteria often available? How could it be? Our cafeteria only makes meat buns once a week, and each person can only buy 2. Yesterday Gao Tianqua saw that she was not used to eating steamed dome-shaped bread made of corn flour. Today he bought steamed buns and left them to her. So, this couple needs to think more about each other in order to get along harmoniously, right? As expected, she is the director of women. Whenever they argue, they always come to do her ideological work. But she's right, Gao Tianqua is indeed a good man. Chapter 5. Carrying her behind her and interacting with other women. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. After riding for half an hour, I finally arrived at the market. This is actually a movie venue in the town, and there are cries of sales coming from all over. Because there is only one time a month, the early ones are already crowded with various small vendors doing business. All kinds of vegetables, fruits, and daily necessities are readily available. There are also small roadside fried deep-fried dough stick stalls. The golden deep-fried dough sticks exude fragrance, which makes people drool. Looking at this place full of human smoke and fire, Jiang Wan surprisingly became a little excited. Thank you, sister.in.law. I was a bit busy beforehand. Jiang Wan thanked her. The criminal sister.in.law watched her disappear without a trace and said, "Xiao Jiang, don't go far, I'll find you later." Jiang Wan found a nearby spot in the market, opened the cloth bag, and took out a piece of cloth to lay on the ground. When I first started studying fashion design in college, would make clothes and accessories with my classmates and sell them together. Setting up a stall was not difficult for her, and she shouted loudly, "What a beautiful dress! Come and take a look." Upon hearing the shouting, a few women walked over to take a look. "Yo, this dress is really nice." A woman in a dress picked up the dress and looked at it. The color is plain and the style is unique, with a belt made of shredded fabric on top. The style and quality are better than those sold in state-owned clothing stores. "Girl, how much does your dress cost?" Jiang Wan worked tirelessly all night, even designing and handcrafting 5 dresses. As soon as they were put out, she was surrounded by onlookers, and the women couldn't even walk. "Sister, this dress costs 7 yuan per piece." "Oh, this is too expensive," several women muttered on the spot. In 1988, the average employee's salary was only 70.80 yuan, and this dress costing 7 yuan could buy several pounds of meat. "Beautiful sister, each of my dresses is unique, and I can't find the same one on this street." Jiang Wan compared the dress to her and said, "If you wear the dress I made, how many men on the road would stare at you?" Ha ha ha. The women were amused by her words. No matter what era, women's money is indeed the best to earn. In no time, Jiang Wan's several dresses were sold out. "I earned a total of 35 yuan, and Jiang Wan is going to buy something. We don't have any soap at home, so we need to buy some toilet paper and daily necessities. This amount of money is really not worth spending. I spent 7 or 8 yuan in just a while. I finally found you." Sister-in-law searched for half a day in the market. "Sister-in-law, have you seen anyone selling fabrics?" Jiang Wan wants to use the remaining money to buy some fabric. After all, she promised to compensate Mrs. Li for her bodybuilding pants. "Ah, over there, I'll accompany you." Mrs. Xing was very enthusiastic and pulled Jiang Wan towards the opposite side. He, Xiao Jiang, are you planning to make clothes for Xiao Gao?" Before Jiang Wan could answer, sister-in-law smiled and said, "Sure enough, you still care about him. My sister.in.law noticed that the white fabric over there is good. It's getting hot, so I can make a shirt for Xiao Gao." She had no intention of making clothes for Gao Tianque, so she couldn't resist and enthusiastically pulled him across from her. "Brother Tianque, what do you think of this material?" A familiar voice came, and Jiang Wan looked towards the fabric stall and unexpectedly saw Lu Xiaona. Standing beside her stood a tall and upright figure, which looked extremely prominent in the moving crowd. "Your shirt is all worn out, and my sister.in.law doesn't know how to take care of anyone at all. She won't even make you a piece of clothing if the collar is loose." She gestured on him with a piece of white material. "This one suits you quite well. I'll buy it and make a shirt for you." Gao Tianque wanted to refuse, so Lu Xiaona paid directly. "Captain Gao, Xiaona, are you also here?" said the sister.in.law, and the two turned their heads to look over. Seeing Jiang Wan standing beside him, Gao Tianque's face showed embarrassment and he said, Why are you here?" Lu Xiaona's hand was still on his chest, and he quickly took a half step back. Jiang Wan looked at the two people standing together with a smile and remained silent. Gao Tianque's face slightly darkened. Why does he have a feeling of being caught and raped in bed? Just now she asked Gao Tianque if he could give her a ride, and he said he would take Lu Xiaona to the market in the blink of an eye if he didn't have time. He quickly explained, "I ran into Xiaona on the way and she said she was coming to the market. I'll drop her off by the way." Men should not explain, explanation is just a cover-up. "That's right, I didn't see you on the way," Jiang Wan asked with a smile as she looked at Gao Tianque. Gao Tianque's face was hot, and he didn't know that Jiang Wan was coming to the market. If she had just said so, he would have taken her over. Who knew that Lu Xiaona had been waiting for him at the entrance of the yard for a long time, and her usual relationship was good. She refused in person. Looking at the awkward atmosphere, Lu Xiaona stepped forward in a teapot and said, "Sister-in-law, don't be angry. I didn't mean to. I didn't know you had an appointment with brother Qinque. If you had known, I wouldn't have let her pick me up." This embellishment is not an explanation, it is clearly an attempt to stir up fire. The sister-in-law immediately saw Lu Xiaona's thoughts, and it was really unreasonable not to bring her own wife and other women to the market. She quickly stepped forward to ease the atmosphere and interrupted, "Captain Gao specifically asked me to bring Xiao Jiang over. By the way, isn't Xiao Jiang going to buy cloth and make clothes for Xiao Gao? Come on," the sister-in-law pulled her to Gao Qinque's side. "Look at these fabrics and see if you like them." Jiang Wan glanced at the material held in Lu Xiaona's hand and said, "The piece that Xiaona bought is good." "For whom?" Lu Xiaona instinctively turned her hand towards her back and looked at Gao Qinque beside her. "Sister-in-law, this woman is meant to take good care of her own men. If she can't take good care of herself, she can't blame others. Who else? Who is it?" She turned her head to look at Lu Xiaona and said, "Isn't that you?" Jiang Wan smiled and answered while selecting fabric, "So, this fabric was bought for Qinque. A three-legged toad is difficult to find, two-legged men are everywhere, and she always stares at other men." Gao Qinque looked at the provocative Xiaona and quickly stopped, "Xiaona, don't speak recklessly. Brother Qinque." Lu Xiaona pouted, and Gao Qinque's face was extremely ugly. This later spread that Lu Xiaona was not clear with him, he was not someone like Gao Qinque. Lu Xiaona swallowed her words and said with a dark face, "Sister-in-law misunderstood. She bought it for my dad." He dared to be arrogant in front of her even with this little bit of moral knowledge, and closed his mouth in frustration. Jiang Wan and Gao Qinque didn't say a word throughout, and he occasionally looked at her. "I don't know why, but I always worry in my heart that she will get angry about this." After buying the materials, Gao Qinque pushed his bicycle over and said, "Let's go back." Jiang Wan was about to get on the car when she didn't want Lu Xiaona to just sit in the back seat. She looked at Jiang Wan hypocritically and said, "Oh, I'm sorry sister-in-law. It was Tianque who brought me over just now. The market is so far away, I'm afraid I can't walk back alone." Gao Qinque turned his head and looked at Jiang Wan, feeling a bit embarrassed. Refusal was neither right nor wrong. Chapter 6. Smash the face and redeem the lost reputation on your own. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Judging from her posture, she doesn't want to sit in a spacious car, but clearly wants to sit in her wife's seat. Jiang Wan watched as she sat on top without getting down, and it was not easy to blame her in public. Watching three people freeze here, sister-in-law came up and grabbed Lu Xiaona. "Xiaona, take my car and I'll take you back." "Hey, sister-in-law, what are you doing?" "I want to take brother Qinque's car." The criminal sister-in-law forcefully pushed Lu Xiaona into her car and said, "The couple, why are you going to join in the fun?" Lu Xiaona was reluctantly taken away by his sister-in-law. Gao Qinque pushed the car in front of her and said, "Let's go." Jiang Wan sat at the back of the car, holding onto the seat with both hands to maintain balance. "Do you like her?" She suddenly spoke. "What are you talking about? Who do you like?" He looked at Jiang Wan behind him with a puzzled expression. "Lu Xiaona." Jiang Wan has always been straightforward and doesn't like to beat around the bush. Gao Qinque suddenly slammed on the brakes and collided with his broad back, quickly hugging his waist. This waist feels really good, you can vaguely feel his strong abdominal muscles. Jiang Wan quickly released her hand and relieved her embarrassment, saying, "I'm not against you being with her, it's just that she's not suitable for you. I sincerely wish you a divorce, but you haven't divorced yet." "What are you talking nonsense about?" Gao Tianqua's face turned red. I treat Xiaona like a younger sister, not as you think. Really? But didn't you almost get engaged before? Jiang Wan kindly reminded, this is not what I want, it's what she wants. Gao Tianqua is a military officer, and what matters most is his reputation. Fortunately, I met my sister.in.law today, and if anyone else sees rumors spreading, they may not be able to criticize me. What sounds good is that they are in love with each other, but what doesn't sound good is their infidelity within marriage. This discerning person can tell that Lu Xiaona has intentions towards him. The sister.in.law of this family courtyard also secretly discussed, saying that Xiaona is more worthy of Gao Tianqua than Jiang Wan. He is a married man who is too close to his ex, isn't this a scumbag? Gao Tianqua seemed to realize something, he remained silent and didn't speak. After sending Jiang Wan home, he went to the military camp and it was evident that he seemed very angry. He left without looking back. Anyway, they will get divorced soon, and I was just kind enough to remind him. As for how he wants to do it himself, it's his business. In the room, she took out the purchased fabric and bought some denim and a piece of bodybuilding pants fabric today. I didn't originally plan to buy fabric for Gao Tianqua, but I was told by my sister.in.law that I ended up spending 5 yuan to buy it. Counting the scattered bills left in my hands, this amount of money is really not worth spending. The next morning, Jiang Wan packed her things and prepared to find Aunt Li. This military district's family courtyard is quite large, and almost every family has its own independent courtyard. Before Jiang Wan arrived at the door, she noticed that many people had gathered at the entrance of Aunt Li's yard. Standing in the crowd was Lu Xiaona, who stood out among the women and her voice was also quite outstanding. Mrs. Li, don't worry, if Jiang Wan doesn't compensate you for her bodybuilding pants today, I won't be the first to spare her. Her words were echoed by several sister.in.law. That's right, Jiang Wan is the culprit in our courtyard. No one has ever been angry with her. If she doesn't come later, we'll accompany you to fight against her. Words don't count, let's see who can continue to protect her, even if it's her man coming, it won't work. A few sister.in.law gathered at Li's doorstep, rolling up their sleeves with high momentum. I plan to seek revenge and go together to suppress Jiang Wan. Lu Xiaona has been repeatedly humiliated by Jiang Wan's illiteracy in the past 2 days, and she happened to find an opportunity to deal with her. Dare to show her face in front of brother Tianqua, and even an illiterate person from a rural area dares to compete with her. With so many people fighting against her together, let Gao Tianqua see her true face with his own eyes. Li's sister.in.law feels a bit guilty. His man came back last night to train her. Recently, I was originally assessing the promotion of deputy battalion commander, and I wish the military district leaders knew about her quarrel with Jiang Wan. It can't be compared to Gao Tianqua, because being criticized for this family dispute is not worth it. Mrs. Li didn't want to make a scene with them, so she hesitated and said, "Oh my, let's forget it, it's just a pair of pants." Lu Xiaona looked at her and wanted to back down, deliberately provoking her, "Why, Sister Li, are you afraid of Jiang Wan?" A few sister.in.law excitedly stepped forward to cheer, "She's afraid, we're not afraid. We must let her know our strength this time. If we don't return our pants, we'll sue the political commissar." Li's sister.in.law couldn't help but become anxious when she heard that she was going to make trouble for the political commissar. "Oh my, that won't work. Sister Li, don't worry, we'll make the decision for you." Xiaona patted her shoulder. "Xiao Na, who is in charge?" A voice came from the door. Everyone looked over, and Jiang Wan coldly watched as a few people walked over. Lu Xiaona was taken aback by the sight, not expecting that this illiterate person would dare to come. Just a pair of pants, Xiaona is going to cause trouble to the leader. I don't think it's for Mrs. Li, but for herself. Lu Xiaona's face turned red and she said, What nonsense are you talking about? Back then, you promised to return Mrs. Li's bodybuilding pants in front of everyone, and I was doing it to make amends for her. Everyone knows that Mrs. Li's man and Gao Tianque are both selecting vice battalion commanders, and at this time, the situation is not good for anyone. Jiang Wan walked up to Mrs. Li and took out pants wrapped in craft paper from her bag. I promised to pay it back today. Looking at the bodybuilding pants in her hand, the sister.in.law who had just shouted were all dumbfounded. I really returned my pants after seeing this ghost sorrow. Did they see it wrong? Li's sister.in.law took the pants in shock. The meticulously cut workmanship looked even better than what she had bought in a state-owned store. Li's sister.in.law, Yingzi is at home. Let her give it a try, and if it's not suitable, I can modify it. Okay. Mrs. Li looked at her pants and quickly called for Yingzi. Yingzi put on the bodybuilding pants sewn by Jiang Wan, which fit her perfectly. She immediately jumped up and said, "Wow, it's so beautiful. I also have bodybuilding pants, and this time they will envy me for being delicate." Mrs. Li, this is for you. Jiang Wan took out a skirt. This is the remaining fabric she made for the skirt, and by the way, she sewed a piece. It was my fault before, this can be considered as my apology. Is there anything else for me? Mrs. Li felt a bit embarrassed and didn't have the face to answer. Well, I'm so sorry about that. Jiang Wan's sincere apology would make her appear stingy if she continued to make things difficult. Oh my, this dress looks so beautiful. Li's sister.in.law, show me. Several sister.in.law were just planning to attack her together, and now they were all surrounding Li's sister.in.law's skirt. It has to be said that the dress designed by Jiang Wan is definitely more beautiful than those in state-owned stores, and the workmanship is even more impressive. Lu Xiaona was so angry that she clenched her fists tightly. She really underestimated her. I wanted to give her some color to see, but I didn't expect this illiterate person to win over people like this. Chapter 7. I will not divorce, you will always be free. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Li's sister.in.law, can you just forget about it? You forgot how she scolded you before. She finally caught the opportunity and absolutely couldn't let Jiang Wan go. Mrs. Li has a hot temper and loves to take advantage of small things. She can't smile as she looks at her dress. Oh, Xiaona, this little Jiang has already paid for my pants. This person who reaches out and doesn't hit the smiling face can't be held back even after apologizing and giving gifts. Besides, we also have to worry about the relationships between men. It's not beneficial to have a strained relationship behind the scenes. Lu Xiaona originally intended to borrow a knife to kill, but she unexpectedly miscalculated. Jiang Wan couldn't help but sarcastically look at her and say, "Why, are you still thinking about how to sue me?" Lu Xiaona's face darkened and she quickly smiled again. Brother Tianque has already submitted his divorce application, and you will soon be leaving the family home. Even you, who are illiterate, deserve him. A bad woman who can't even tolerate children will only make him even more disgusted. The news is really well informed, even knowing about Gao Tianque's divorce application. I almost forgot that her father is a counselor, and this divorce application still needs his approval. Watching Lu Xiaona's proud expression, Jiang Wan's smile instantly disappeared, and her cold voice made people shudder. I don't deserve it, can it be difficult for you? Since you know we haven't divorced yet, what's the name for seducing married men? Don't you know that those who break military marriages will be convicted of the crime of breaking military marriages? You. Lu Xiaona's choked little face turned red and white, changing colors to make her look beautiful. This illiterate person actually knows the crime of sabotaging military marriages. Lu Xiaona bit her lip and was so angry that she couldn't speak. It seems that she understands. If she doesn't understand, Jiang Wan can teach her the law on the spot at any time. As long as she hasn't divorced, Lu Xiaona has ulterior motives towards Gao Tianque, who is the mistress who destroys their marriage. Jiang Wan turned disdainfully towards several sister.in.law and said with a smile, I have something else to do today. When I have the opportunity, I will make a dress for each sister.in.law. Really? These women looked at each other in disbelief. Just now, they were fighting against each other, and soon a skirt was bought. What deep hatred can exist between them is nothing more than some trivial conflicts. It's not difficult for Jiang Wan to change her reputation, so she starts with what women love the most. Everyone gathered around Jiang Wan, and Lu Xiaona was thrown aside to stare. Lu Xiaona glared at her angrily and said, when Tianque divorces you, let's see how much longer you can laugh. Jiang Wan lazily took care of her, as she had more important things to attend to than tidying up little Bailian. In the past few days, I have been buying food in the cafeteria, and I have seen that I have used almost all the money in my hands. She decided to go to the coal yard to buy some coal, and cooking and boiling water at home would be more economical for her. In this era, rice and noodles were supplied in limited quantities, and even coal was supplied in limited quantities. Jiang Wan packed up the grain, meat, and coal and firewood purchase certificates. She borrowed a small cart to transport goods and headed towards the coal factory. Fortunately, it wasn't too far away and she walked for over 20 minutes to get there. Near the coal yard is the town supply and marketing cooperative, and there is a large flow of people coming here to buy things on weekdays. She looked around, with rows of low buildings scattered in a sense of time, all of which were street views that could only be seen on TV. For her, who was born after 1995, she truly felt novel and asked questions everywhere as she walked. Jiang Wan arrived across from the supply and marketing cooperative and took down the big bag from the small cart. The denim fabric she bought at the last market has been made into jeans and denim clothing for her. Jeans began to become popular after the reform and opening up, causing a wave of popularity that lasted for decades. At first, many people couldn't accept it, so it wasn't until the late 1980s that domestic clothing factories began making jeans. Jiang Wan is a fashion designer who knows the future fashion trends very well. Open the package and Jiang Wan will lay all the prepared clothes on the ground. Looking at passers-by, he shouted, "Come and take a look, the most popular jeans, denim jackets, and vests." Upon hearing the shout, all the young daughter.in law and young lady in the vicinity came over to inspect. In order to sell clothes, Jiang Wan specially put on denim clothes as a model on site. In this era, big toe leather shoes and bell-bottomed pants, twisted buttocks when walking, toed mirrors paired with a recorder, are simply the favorite of young and fashionable girls and young men. Wow, these are denim jackets and bell-bottoms. My favorite Little Tigers team wears these. A few days ago, I went to a state-owned clothing store and found that this style of jeans costs at least 20 yuan. Oh, sister, you look really nice in your outfit. Do you have the size we're wearing? Yes, there are. Jiang Wan shouted like a small vendor. Fashionable clothes are the most popular among young people, and it's not her turn to promote them at all. In the blink of an eye, all the efforts are sold out. Squeak. A military green jeep stopped on the opposite side, and Gao Tianque got off the car. The instructor asked him to deliver some documents to the relevant departments in the town, which happened to be across the street from the supply and marketing cooperative. Hey, platoon leader. Driver Xiao Wu looked across from him. Isn't that sister.in.law? Jiang Wanzheng squatted there with a face full of financial obsession, counting the bills inside her hands. The denim vest was 10 yuan, each pair of jeans was sold for 15 yuan, and the denim jacket was 20 yuan. She sold a total of 175 yuan, and after deducting the cost of buying fabric and colored thread for Jiang Wan, she has earned at least 150 yuan in the past few days. There is indeed a lot of money, but it takes time and effort to sew. Her fingers are wrapped in adhesive tape. It would be great if she could have a sewing machine. She hopes that the sewing machines sold in the supply and marketing cooperative can be as cheap as 160 yuan. She has to move out at any time after the divorce, so she's not buying for now. And for many families, not everyone can afford a sewing machine. I remember when my grandmother was young, she had one. She liked fashion design because of her grandmother. Jiang Wan looked at the money in her hand, and indeed, money was more reassuring than men. It can be considered as earning the first bucket of gold. Even moving out to live one's own life after divorce is not a problem. What is sister.in.law doing? It seems like she's setting up a stall. Xiao Wu asked in confusion. Gao Tianqua coldly watched as her financial fanatic stuffed money into her pocket. She didn't want his money but ran out to set up a stall. Where did she get so many clothes to sell from? He never knew that Jiang Wan could even sew clothes. Shouldn't it have been stolen again? Gao Tianqua's gaze was deep, and as he looked at Jiang Wan now, he felt very different from before. Xiao Wu looked at him with a furrowed brow and said, "Captain, would you like to go over and say hello?" Gao Tianqua turned around and left. "No need, go get down to business first, and rush back to the military camp before tonight. There are many people queuing up to buy coal at the coal yard." Jiang Wan bought 20 kilograms of honeycomb coal and a little flour, and also cut 2 pounds of meat. She waited until evening to push the small cart towards home. The coal in this car is still a bit heavy, and it's a bit unbearable not to do physical work on weekdays. The sky gradually darkened, and the hot and stuffy sky was followed by rain. No, it's raining. The weather is so unpredictable that if these coal gets wet, it will be completely wasted. She quickened her pace and headed towards home, but little did she know that the rain was getting heavier and heavier. The empty muddy road was deserted, and there was no place to take shelter from the rain. She kicked deeply and lightly. Fortunately the meat and flour were packed in plastic bags, and she was worried about getting wet. She was wrapped in clothes. Jeep drivers arrived on the bumpy road, and Gao Tianqua was rushing back to the military camp. He instructed Xiao Wu, "It's raining too hard, drive slowly." At just 6 o'clock, the sky became dark and the visibility decreased. "Captain, if you go back late again, there won't be any food left in the cafeteria. Then also pay attention to driving safety," Gao Tianqua reminded seriously. Pushi. The muddy water on the road splashed Jiang Wan all over her body, and she stood in place with a muddy face. Don't you know if you need to drive slowly when you see someone? Can you drive?" Jiang Wan sat down on the ground with his mouth full of mud, and could not open his mouth to roast. Xiao Wu looked at the figure behind the car from the rearview mirror and said, "Captain, the girl who just pulled the goods seems to have fallen. On this rainy day, a woman falls while pulling goods, afraid of encountering danger." The jeep slowly backed up and the car window opened, saying, "Sister, are you okay?" Jiang Wan looked at the car window with a messy face and wiped the mud and water from her eyes, saying, "Is the sky wide?" Gao Tianqua finally saw her face clearly from the blurry and indistinguishable mud, and hesitated slightly. Jiang Wan. Chapter 8. Tonight, we same room, different beds. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Xiao Wu saw that it was Jiang Wan and quickly opened the car door, saying, "Sister-in-law, hurry up and get in the car." She sat in the back seat, her whole body wet and her hair stuck to her face, looking extremely disheveled, with tree leaves sticking to her hair. The small cart was stuffed into the trunk, and the coal on one cart was soaked in rainwater and turned into coal slag, making it a sparse and black beach. Xiao Wu looked at her disheveled appearance and cautiously said, "What's wrong with you?" "I almost didn't recognize her." "I'm fine, I just went to buy some coal." Who knew it was raining? The atmosphere inside the car was a bit cold, and her shoulder accidentally touched Gao Tianqua. He instinctively leaned towards the car window and distanced himself from Jiang Wan. "Ah no." Jiang Wan sneezed. Gao Tianque picked up his handkerchief and handed it to her in a cold tone, saying, "In the future, just let me go by coal." "Thank you." She took the handkerchief and wiped the mud off her face. "You're quite busy on weekdays, I can handle this little thing myself." Xiao Wu widened his eyes in shock. Didn't he hear it right? Jiang Wan has a bad attitude towards everyone on weekdays. Last time he drove to fetch coal for her, he refused and greeted his ancestors for 18 generations. The young man felt embarrassed and panicked when he heard those curses. Now Mother Yiksha actually says thank you. Still saying that pulling coal is a small matter. Xiao Wu first sent the two of them home to the hospital and pushed the coal roof back home in the wind and rain. Jiang Wan just pushed open the door of the firewood room, and with a thud, the roof tiles fell towards the ground. Gao Tianque quickly pulled her aside and almost hit her head. The wooden room was covered in water stains, and soap boxes drifted along with the water. The high and wide folding bed was completely soaked. The roof tiles have always been damaged, and the original owner was too lazy to ignore them. On rainy days, it rained heavily outside and drizzled lightly inside the house. The main house is pretty good, and Jiang Wan is holding a bucket and spittoon on the ground to collect water, ticking to the rhythm. Gao Tianque burned some hot water and said, "You go wash and change clothes, if you don't catch a cold." Jiang Wan looked at him with her clothes. Didn't she forget that there was only one room available now? Gao Tianque instinctively reacted and his face turned slightly red. He quickly turned his back and said, "I'll go back to the military camp tonight." "Don't go back, it's raining outside. The firewood room is full of water and I'm sure I can't sleep at night." It's not safe for him to go back to the military camp at this time. Jiang Wan found a piece of cloth and pulled up a curtain to block the room, separating it. I moved his folding bed in and laid clean sheets and bedding for him again. Since getting married, although Gao Tianque occasionally stays overnight when he comes back, he has never lived in the same room. Tonight, he can only make do with it. Jiang Wan reminded him, "Sleeping wet is easy to get sick. The white towel over there is yours." Gao Tianque looked at two clean towels on the wash basin rack. The pink one was Jiang Wan's and the white one was his. In the past, she never prepared these things and used them to be pitch black and dirty on weekdays. Jiang Wan was muddy and soaked all over, and she took off her wet and dirty clothes. Wiped himself with hot water, and Gao Tianque sat on the bed wiping the water on his head. "Wow, wow." The sound of Jiang Wan wriggling the towel came from the water. She lifted her neck and rubbed her body, the faint light reflected through the thin sheets in the wall mirror. Jiang Wan stood up and took off her wet clothes, and in the shadow, she could see every move. Gao Tianque vaguely saw a seductive figure, his hand holding a towel slightly tightened. The feeling of dry mouth and tongue made his throat swallow for a moment, and he quickly shifted his gaze away from the mirror. He picked up the cold water on the table and took a few gulps, calming his rapid breathing. Dressed up and lying in bed, Jiang Wan looked at Gao Tianque across from the curtain. "Did you sleep?" she asked in a low voice. "No." Gao Tianque turned his face to one side. Jiang Wan didn't feel sleepy at this moment and said, "When will the divorce application you submitted be approved?" Since she wore it here, the only person she knew was Gao Tianque, and she has started to consider her future destination. Gao Tianque roughly calculated the time. "About tomorrow." "I didn't expect it to be quite fast, but Jiang Wan has her own plans and doesn't want to go back to the original owner's hometown." "Oh, then I'll go find a place to live tomorrow." Once the divorce application is approved, they will have no relationship and she will not be able to continue living here. It was her own promise that she couldn't go back on it. "If you don't want to go back to your hometown, I can help you find a house. After all, it's a marital affair. Her parents saved his life back then, so it's still important to take care of her." "No need, since we're all getting divorced, I'll just solve my own problem." Since there is no emotion, delaying each other is not good for both parties. Compared to Gao Tianque, nowadays Jiang Wan seems to be more looking forward to divorce. The sound of rain all night long made Jiang Wan unable to sleep, and she didn't know when she would become confused. Duh, duh, duh. The rhythmic sound outside woke her up. When Jiang Wan opened her eyes, it was already bright. She pulled open the curtain and found that Gao Tianque was not inside the house. The folded bed blanket was neatly stacked into tofu blocks. She pushed open the door, and by then the rain had stopped outside, and the entire sky began to clear up. The mud left on the firewood house floor was cleaned up, and Gao Tianque was working with a shovel on the cement yard. The wet coal slag that was soaked in water yesterday was crushed again and then pressed hard with a coal-pouring tool. Gao Tianque went to his sister-in-law's house early in the morning to borrow a mold for making honeycomb coal and reshaped the shape of the coal. He shoveled the coal with force, and the back of his shirt was already soaked, with beads of sweat rising from his forehead. Through the light and thin clothes, the collar was slightly open, and one could vaguely see his broad shoulders and strong waist. The rolled-up cuffs provide strong muscle flow in the arms. Jiang Wan admired Gao Tianque, who was working hard. Such a man is truly top-notch. Unfortunately, today is the day of their divorce. No matter how excellent it is not her fault. Jiang Wan rolled up her sleeves and started cooking in the kitchen. Fortunately, the dry firewood she had dried before was not soaked in the rain. This time, she started the fire quite smoothly. She rarely cooks at home on weekdays. The only thing she knows is how to make rolling noodles from her grandmother. She just searched for a while but didn't see the panel, so she could only wipe the wooden table clean and use it as a panel. She needed some dough and used a rolling pin to roll it into a pancake. After folding it in half, she evenly cut it into strips with a knife. I grabbed a handful of dry flour and pulled open the cut noodles. After boiling the water, I threw it into the water and cooked it. I added some seasoning to the bowl, and added some scallions to the soy sauce and vinegar. A spoonful of chili noodles was placed on the noodles scooped out, and a little lard was dug out of the jar. I cut the meat when I bought noodles yesterday, fried the fat with oil, and planned to keep the lean meat for tomorrow to make dumplings. The weather is too hot and there is no refrigerator to store it. She sprinkled some salt on it, but if she didn't finish it quickly, it might break down. Jiang Wan couldn't bear to put more and dug up 2 small spoonfuls of lard. The hot pork poured on top of it made a sizzling sound, and the pungent aroma penetrated her nose. The corners of the eaves and walls are stacked with freshly made coal, which can be burned after a few days of drying. After finishing his work, Gao Tianque returned to the house, and waves of fragrance greeted him. "Wash your hands and prepare to eat." Jiang Wan came out with 2 bowls of noodles. Looking at the fragrant noodles on the table, Gao Tianque looked surprised and said, "Did you make this?" Looking at Jiang Wan placing dishes, she has undergone too much change recently. With such diligence, it's hard not to say that she sincerely regrets and plans to live a good life with him, but also doesn't want to divorce him. Chapter 9 Divorce. Eating the last breakup dinner. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. Gao Tianque wiped his face and the two sat together to eat. After 3 years of marriage, I had my first meal cooked by her. I thought she didn't know how to cook, but I didn't want to look good. The chili peppers on top are especially refreshing when paired with lard, which immediately increases one's appetite. I have prepared my household registration book and ID card, and I will go with you to apply for divorce in a moment. Jiang Wan doesn't have much luggage, only a few carry-on clothes have been packed. After all, it's just a couple's dinner, just consider it as the last farewell dinner. Gao Tianque picked up the noodles and didn't even put them into his mouth. His gloomy and puzzled eyes looked at Jiang Wan. Jiang Wan's first cooking was actually a breakup between the two of them. Previously, she was clearly unwilling to divorce, but now she feels more anxious than herself. He paused for a moment and responded coldly, "Okay. Isn't divorce exactly what he has always wanted?" Being about to achieve one's wish should naturally bring joy. Brother Qinque. A very uncomfortable voice came from outside the door. Lu Xiaona bounced in, coming to her house as skillfully as coming to her own. Jiang Wan glanced at her. She wore a pink floral skirt and specially knitted 2 fried dough twists braids. Looking in a good mood, the proud little gaze turned to Jiang Wan and said, "Where's sister.in.law eating?" She rushed over while she was having a breakup dinner. "Are you polite?" Jiang Wan ignored her and continued to take big bites of the noodles in the bowl, finishing it in just a few bites. Hiccup. She let out a deep hiccup, her mouth full of greasy food, and lifted the back of her hand to wipe her mouth randomly. Looking at her rude appearance, Lu Xiaona looked contemptuous and disdainful. She pinched the noodles in front of Gao Tianque and said, "What's so delicious about this noodles?" "Brother Tianque, look what I brought you." Lu Xiaona pushed away the noodles made by Jiang Wan with disdain. She took out a lunch box and opened it, which contained hot dumplings. "I made this dumpling this morning. You can try it and it will be delicious." Gao Tianque realized his relationship with Xiaona now because Jiang Wan had reminded him. One is a married military officer, and the other is an unmarried single young woman. No matter how good the relationship is, one should avoid suspicion. He simply refused. "Xiaona, I'll just eat noodles. You can take the dumplings back." Lu Xiaona enthusiastically made dumplings specifically for him, but still refused in person. She looked aggrieved and said, "Brother Tianque, weren't you my favorite dumpling before?" Jiang Wan could not help roast, "It seems that she doesn't like eating now." Lu Xiaona, who was mocked, was not angry at all today. Instead, she smiled and said, "Sister-in-law, what do you mean by that?" "The literal meaning." Jiang Wan pursed her lips and said, "It's nothing to do, hurry up and leave." Lu Xiaona looked at the marriage certificate and household registration book on the table next to her and smiled, "It seems that I'm not the one who should leave." Xiao Gao. At this moment, a voice came from outside the door. A middle-aged man in military uniform walked into the yard and said, "Are you at home?" The man has a tall and thin figure, with majestic and handsome eyebrows and eyes, and his military uniform is particularly eye-catching. "Instructor Lu." Gao Tianque quickly went to greet him. He turned out to be Instructor Lu, also known as Xiaona's father Lu Dihai. Instructor Lu was also surprised when he saw his daughter and said, "Xiaona, why are you here?" "Dad. I'm here to send dumplings to Brother Tianque." Lu Xiaona smiled sweetly, knowing in the morning that her father was coming to find Gao Tianque. It is certain that the divorce application has been approved. Thinking that Gao Tianque will soon be able to return to singlehood, he naturally came over in an impatient manner. Gao Tianque welcomed Instructor Lu into the room, and Lu Xiaona walked up to Jiang Wan and whispered in a low voice. "What did I say? You won't be Brother Tianque's wife right away." Previously, relying on her being a wealthy wife, she subjected her to various forms of humiliation. When she got divorced, she obediently rolled out of the family courtyard. Today, she was finally about to vent her anger, and no one could stop her and Tianque's brother anymore. Jiang Wan ignored her and politely greeted her, "Hello, Director Lu." There was no tea at home, so she could only pour 2 cups of water. Director Lu looked inside the house clean and tidy, and then looked at Jiang Wan. This is the second time in 3 years that he has met, except for the day he came to witness the wedding. I used to hear that Jiang Wan was a rude and illiterate person, but today he looks very polite when speaking and treating things. Xiao Gao. Instructor Lu came straight to the point, "I saw your divorce application." Jiang Wan is saying why he came over, and indeed it was for the sake of divorce. Not wanting to, the next second Instructor Lu's face changed and he said, "Do you know that military marriages cannot be divorced? Xiao may have some problems in some aspects, but we always need to give them the opportunity to correct them." This comrade who dares to make corrections is also a good comrade. You can't divorce her just because of a small matter. I have already submitted your application for promotion to Deputy Battalion Commander. You cannot make any mistakes in your ideological consciousness at this time. What does this mean? He didn't come to approve the divorce. Gao Qianque was personally promoted by Instructor Lu, and in all aspects, he is first class in the military. It's not easy to be promoted to Deputy Battalion Commander now. If there is a divorce at this time, he will definitely be replaced. You should know that even if he signs the divorce application, it ultimately needs to be submitted to the political commissar for approval. When the time comes, not to mention being promoted to battalion commander, you may even face public criticism. Listening to Gao Qianque, his heart also began to waver. At this time, divorce is really not the right time. This luggage has been packed and the household registration book has been taken out. Now tell her not to leave. Jiang Wan knew that Gao Qianque was considering more, so she had to ask clearly, Coach Lu, I really don't fit in with Gao Qianque. You also know what my usual style is. Don't worry, I will definitely not affect his future. How about you approve the divorce application first? Instructor Lu looked bewildered and said, Xiao Jiang, don't you want to get divorced? I don't know who called his office every now and then to complain, crying and making noise about not wanting to divorce Gao Qianque. After only a few days of hard work, has this attitude suddenly changed? Jiang Wan looked embarrassed when asked, do I still have time to be willing now? Nonsense, what do you think marriage is? Instructor Lu has a really bad temper. He worked so hard to make peace beside her, and she even wants a divorce. Do you know how many people are staring at this excellent man, Gao Qianque, and she still doesn't want him? Gao Qianque didn't want to save a hopeless marriage. Instructor, I also think divorce is appropriate. Instructor Lu patted the table with a gloomy and angry expression. Gao Qianque, let me tell you a good story. Why don't you listen? I have already rejected my divorce application, so consider it carefully on your own. Instructor Lu. Before Gao Qianque could finish speaking, Instructor Lu lifted his leg and left. Now it's over, the divorce hasn't been resolved, and I've been harshly criticized. Lu Xiaona became anxious and chased after her, shouting, Dad, I don't agree. Chapter 10. Divorce application rejected. You are listening at novel FUL.audio. She hopes for the stars and the moon, and finally hopes that the two of them are going to divorce. The signature is still from her own father, so it's guaranteed that there won't be any problems. Lu Xiaona was waiting for this illiterate person to get away, her happiness was within reach, but she was told that her divorce application had been rejected. He angrily rebuked with a gloomy face, Xiaona, this is between Xiaogao and Xiaojiang. Don't talk nonsense. Instructor Lu knows that his daughter has always liked being tall and wealthy, and even so, she cannot interfere with other people's relationships. The couple can't divorce, and it's not up to you to agree or disagree here. Dad, Brother Qianque doesn't like her at all. Jiang Wan, who is a big illiterate, is not worthy of him. Lu Xiaona's emotions broke down and she held on to Director Lu's arm, crying and saying, I don't care. You should quickly approve their divorce application. Director Lu's face turned ugly and he awkwardly rebuked in public, please shut up. This is a military wedding, how can it be treated as a children's play for you to talk nonsense about? It's shameless for an unmarried girl to say such things in public. Instructor Lu pulled his daughter away, and Lu Xiaona's crying could still be heard from a distance. Dad, let go of me. Why don't you let them divorce? Brother Qianque doesn't even like her. The two of them stood still for a few seconds, and the atmosphere became even more awkward. Gao Qianque looked at her disappointed expression and said, there will be opportunities in the future. What does it mean? Was rejected this time, will you find another chance to divorce? I'll go back to the military camp first. I'll find time to fix the roof of the firewood shed. After making such a big fuss, Gao Tianque felt a bit irritable and left with just one sentence. Jiang Wan looked at the motionless noodles on the table, probably he wasn't in the mood to eat either. Get it? She ate both bowls of scattered noodles alone. She rubbed her bulging lower abdomen and belched heavily. Jiang Wan heard someone crying in the middle of the night and could hear them clearly across several courtyards. Lu Xiaona was deeply affected, and Instructor Lu went to the military camp that night to avoid his daughter. Jiang Wan has already planned to have a showdown with Gao Tianque when he returns. Since we can't get divorced for the time being, we have to continue living here. Squeak. Early the next morning, the sound of cars came from the yard. Jiang Wan pushed open the room door and saw Gao Tianque getting off a small tricycle carrying goods. Busy removing bricks, tiles, cement, and sand from the car. The man in military uniform followed him down from the driver's cabin and greeted Jiang Wan as soon as he entered the yard. Hello sister.in.law. The man has a handsome and well-proportioned figure with a smile on his face, and speaks very cleverly. Jiang Wan remembers her, his name is Li Jiancheng, and he was a duty officer next to the Zhou political commissar of the military region. In the military camp, he had the best relationship with Gao Tianque, but every time he came to his home to find Gao Tianque, the original owner had a very bad attitude towards him, and over time, people didn't come much. Hello, Xiao Li. Jiang Wan politely replied, which surprised Li Jiancheng a bit. This sister.in.law usually looks straight and straight, why is her attitude so good today? She looked at the sand and soil all over the ground. Gao Tianque had come back to repair the roof. Jiang Wan walked over and asked, do you need my help? No need, you go rest. Gao Tianque had a cold attitude and then climbed up the roof with a ladder, starting to repair the damaged bricks and tiles. Lao Gao, what's wrong with you? Li Jiancheng noticed something unusual and couldn't help but joke, I always feel like you have a different attitude towards your sister.in.law. Gao Tianque gave him a cold glance and said, what's different? Previously, whenever I mentioned Jiang Wan, Gao Tianque's eyes were filled with anger and contempt. I would never go home unless absolutely necessary, but this time I took the initiative to go home and repair the roof. Although speaking coldly, there is actually a hint of concern. Li Jiancheng looked at Jiang Wan, who was busy in the kitchen, through the roof and asked in a low voice, I heard that your divorce application with your sister.in.law was returned. Apart from Instructor Lu, he only told Li Jiancheng about his application for divorce. Lu Xiaona has been crying so hard lately, and the fact that she got married or not is no longer a secret. It is estimated that the entire military compound knows about it. I think my sister.in.law is also good. She looks much more beautiful than before. It's all said that women need to be coaxed. You coax her, be gentle with her, and she won't make any more fuss. Besides, you can't get divorced now. When the lights turn off at night, she'll know you're okay. Get lost. Gao Tianque's face darkened as he spoke, with a hint of shame in his anger. Where did you learn all this nonsense, kid? Li Jiancheng is 2 years younger than him, and the unmarried Lin Toqing speaks these things fluently. He usually follows the political commissar and naturally learns many words on how to encourage family harmony. Jiang Wan watched as the two of them repaired the roof and went to the kitchen to tie up their aprons and get ready. She applied a layer of salt to the meat she bought the night before yesterday, and the weather has been cool and rainy these past 2 days. She picked it up and smelled it, but it was still fresh and happened to be chopped into meat filling. There are no vegetables at home, only some scallions are added, and the package is pure meat filling. Jiang Wan made over 70 dumplings in one go, but the quantity was not very attractive. Just as it was being cooked in the pot, my sister.in.law passed by outside the yard. Yo! Xiao Gao, is this helping my wife fix the roof? Gao Tianque greeted with a smile when she saw the roof. Seeing Jiang Wan busy in the kitchen again, she said, Xiao Jiang, is this cooking for her husband? Yes, sister.in.law. Jiang Wan waved at her through the window. Previously, the two of them argued every day, but now it seems much calmer. Working one by one and cooking the other, the harmonious relationship between the couple made my sister.in.law very pleased. The dumplings have been cooked, and the roof over Gao Tianque has also been repaired. She brought dumplings into the room, and the two of them were sweating and muddy. You two wash your hands and come over to eat dumplings. Dumplings. Li Jianqing ran over without even washing his hands, drooling as he watched the two large plates of dumplings brought over. Sister-in-law, I didn't expect you to still make dumplings. You should know that in the broad mouth of Gao Tian, Jiang Wan is a lazy and vulgar illiterate person. A small disturbance every 3 days and a big disturbance every 5 days, either demolishing the house or hanging it. Don't mention cooking, even if the lazy roof leaks, they just lie in bed and don't care. Unexpectedly, such a virtuous and gentle side was not at all like what he said was unbearable. Looking at the dumplings on the plate, Gao Tianque was more surprised. Recently, her changes have been too great. Watching her spicy dumplings with vinegar on them, I still remember how he likes to eat dumplings with chili peppers. Jiang Wan looked at Gao Tianque in a daze and said, "What are you staring at? Hurry up and eat." Although the bag doesn't look good and there are 2 boiled and peeled ones, the taste is still good. Taking a bite into the soup and savoring the fragrance, this is the best meal Jiang Wan has ever had here. There were over 70 dumplings in total, and Jiang Wan ate 18 of them. The remaining 2 of them finished eating. This man puts in a lot of effort, so naturally he has a larger appetite. Hiccup. Li Jianqing quickly hiccuped a plate of dumplings and praised it by touching his stomach. Sister-in-law, I didn't expect you to be so skilled. The dumplings are so delicious. Lao Gao really has good taste. Sure enough, he works as a waiter, and his mouth is really good at coaxing people. As he spoke, he looked towards Gao Tianque, who remained silent like a gourd. Jiang Wan never expected to hear his praise. Anyway, she can't get divorced now and can only make do with it. She tidied up the dishes and smiled, "If you like to eat, I'll come back next time and pack it for you." Li Jianqing. Thank you, sister.in.law. The roof has been repaired, and Gao Tianque also plans to leave. It's nothing, I'll go back to the military camp first. Wait a moment. Jiang Wan put down her dishes and sat by the bed. Take off your clothes. Take off your clothes. Gao Tianque's face suddenly changed, and he had to take off his clothes in broad daylight. Didn't he do this behind his back?